Two Ukrainian MiG-29s cruising at an altitude of 100 meters cross into enemy airspace. Ahead stands a Russian command hub, shielded by S-400 and Tor defenses. In the skies, 40 kilometers away, Su-30 fighters prepare to engage. On the ground, surveillance radars follow every movement. The objective: eliminate the core of the enemy drone network, striking civilian facilities. The challenge: fire their AASM Hammer missiles at the Russian command site without being shot down. The objective wasn't an ordinary military site. It was a Russian UAV control hub, the central nerve behind numerous assaults on Ukrainian cities. From this base, crews directed waves of Orlan 10 and Shahed 136 drones that reduced entire districts to blazing ruins. Recordings of Russian drones hitting apartment blocks, energy facilities, and fuel storage reveal the devastating outcome of these missions. Each strike was initiated using coordinates processed within this complex, where consoles, antennas, and servers sustained electronic warfare around the clock. Taking down this site meant far more than smashing equipment. It was about disrupting the command chain behind assaults that plunged millions into darkness and kept them under relentless danger. As long as it stayed functional, every Ukrainian city was only minutes away from becoming a target. That's why the operation was so vital. Wiping out the drone hub meant protecting lives and giving the skies above Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa a moment of relief. For such a mission, standard munitions wouldn't suffice. The MiG-29s carried one of the most lethal systems ever fielded in the war, the AASM Hammer guided bombs. Unlike a standard bomb, the Hammer is a French precision kit that transforms a conventional bomb body into a smart weapon. It adds retractable wings, navigation systems, and even a rocket booster that extends its range to over 60 kilometers when launched from altitude. The pilot doesn't need to fly directly over the target. The weapon can be released from kilometers away, staying clear of the most lethal defensive zones. Against stationary objectives, such as the command post, the Hammer delivered meter-level accuracy, able to penetrate concrete and demolish entire sections with a single hit. This selection was far from random. It represented the only real chance to strike the core of the Russian operation without turning the mission into a one-way trip. Inside the cockpit, visibility was narrow, a low horizon, ridgelines rushing past in a rapid blur, and the digital altimeter holding just above 120 meters. At such an altitude, even the smallest error could prove deadly. Yet it was the only method to remain undetected. The maneuver is known as terrain masking, using the contours of the land as cover from hostile radars. The strategy demanded the MiG-29s to remain low, tracing the contours of Sumy Oblast, a landscape of sweeping plains and tight valleys. Each river curve and every ridge had been charted after months of surveillance. Satellites, drones, and even captured transmissions contributed to mapping the blind spots in the Russian radar grid. On the HUD, the pilot tracked a digital path, marking the precise course. Any slip from it could trigger an immediate radar lock, yet there was no other option. Flying low was the only way to survive. Above 500 meters, the air turned into a clear hunting zone for Russian sensors. Below 100 meters, turbulence from the treetops and the razor-thin room for mistakes became fatal. The slim corridor between 100 and 200 meters was the razor's edge. Hundreds of kilometers away in Kursk, an S-400 Triumph unit powered up its 92 N6E gravestone radar. Inside the command room, the display flickered with a faint, barely noticeable echo. It wasn't a firing solution yet, but it was sufficient of an irregularity to trigger concern. That first trace activated automated protocols. The system software forwarded the readings to the sector command post, which instantly relayed the data to patrolling fighters and interconnected radars. What had been electronic quiet now shifted into a full-scale hunt. The issue was that Russia never depended on just one system. Its air defense doctrine built overlapping tiers of sensors and missiles, creating a genuine kill corridor. The S-400 provided long-range coverage, the Buk M3 controlled the medium range, and the mobile Tor M2 hunted anything reckless enough to fly too low. In reality, this meant the Ukrainian MiG-29s were flying into an electronic maze where each radar behaved like a searchlight, ready to direct a missile. The pilot understood that from this instant onward, every second spent in the sky was another moment. Dozens of Russian operators worked to transform that faint trace into a locked target. The alert triggered by the S-400 now had every Buk and Tor radar sweeping their sectors at peak accuracy. Another silent player was already on station above the battlefield, a Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2. More than just a reconnaissance drone, it served a dual function. For hours, it circled at 18,000 feet, transmitting live visuals of the target straight to the Ukrainian cockpits. Yet that wasn't its primary role. The TB2 was meant to be noticed, a deliberate decoy intended to draw the attention of Russian systems. The Russians were well acquainted with the TB2. From the opening months of the war, it had turned into a symbol of Ukrainian defiance. But as time passed, Russia adjusted, strengthening its defenses and downing dozens of them. Now, each TB2 dispatched to the front faced an almost guaranteed death sentence. Even so, its sacrifice was considered worthwhile if it compelled the enemy to expose their radars. And that is precisely what unfolded. Only a few kilometers ahead, a Panzer S-1 battery switched on its search radar. The operator was convinced he was moments away from downing yet another drone. But the instant he pressed the electronic trigger, his position lit up across the entire electromagnetic spectrum. Within moments, Ukrainian electronic warfare antennas captured the signal. The Panzer's coordinates were pinpointed and relayed to the MiG-29 fighters. Each time a Russian radar activated to follow the TB2, the Ukrainians secured another fragment of the puzzle, charting safer paths through the lethal web of defenses. This was the core of the tactic, employing the TB2 as an expendable pawn on the chessboard while the fighters pressed forward. Meanwhile, the first warning from the S-400 was still active. At the same time, a Russian acoustic detection array, a relic of the Cold War, caught the distant rumble of Ukrainian aircraft. Together, the information outlined a clear vector. Something was advancing at low altitude from the southwest. That data reached a Su-30 pilot patrolling the sector at 5,000 meters. The Russian jet was a daunting opponent. Outfitted with the Bars-R radar, a powerful scanning array able to pick out low-flying targets against the terrain. The Su-30 represented the most serious aerial danger to the MiG-29s. Within moments, they found themselves in the worst-case scenario. Missiles incoming from multiple directions. A concealed Tor M2 battery, hidden along a tree line, fired two 9Me-338 missiles, each able to engage targets in less than 8 seconds. Almost simultaneously, the radar warning receiver lights up with the signature of a Buk M3, firing its medium-range missiles. From above, the Russian Su-30 closes the final distance, releasing its R-77 long-range air-to-air missiles. On the HUD, warning icons flare in red. The pilot jerks the control stick hard, forcing a high G turn as the jet plunges toward the ground. Simultaneously, the countermeasure system spits out chaff and flares in quick bursts. Each burst of chaff, strands of ultra-thin metallic fibers, generates a reflective cloud that disrupts enemy radars, deceiving the missiles into locking onto false targets in the sky. The flares, on the other hand, imitate the engine's heat signature, drawing away infrared-guided missiles. On the pilot's screen, white contrails of incoming missiles streak across the sky in opposing paths. One warhead detonates early, deceived by the chaff. Another locks onto a flare, erupting only meters behind the MiG. The aircraft shudders violently from the blast wave, but manages to remain airborne. Meanwhile, the Su-30 continues the pursuit, unleashing R-77 missiles that tear through the air at supersonic velocity. It's the moment for a last-ditch maneuver. The pilot sets up for the Cobra, a legendary Soviet-era tactic now turned back against its creators. The MiG-29 pulls into an almost vertical climb, its nose aimed directly toward the sky. Airspeed plummets, and for a fleeting moment, the fighter appears suspended in midair. The R-77, calibrated to anticipate high-speed paths, overshoots the mark and flashes past, exploding harmlessly in front. But the maneuver isn't finished. The pilot exploits the rising sun, aligning its blinding glare directly behind the fuselage. The infrared seeker of the second R-77, searching for heat, is dazzled by the brilliance and breaks its lock, spiraling off into empty sky. Still, victory carries a cost. Shrapnel from the earlier blast tears into the tail of one MiG-29. Alarms blare, signaling structural damage, and the display warns of a partial drop in hydraulic pressure. Even so, the engines continue to roar. The jet fights to stay controllable, but after minutes of sheer survival, it remains alive in the sky. The Ukrainian pilots at last identify an opening. The radar warning receiver continues to pulse with threats, yet a narrow window of only a few seconds appears to finish the mission. Without delay, both pilots push the MiG-29s into a zoom climb, a sharp ascent that consumes the final reserves of fuel to reach 8,000 feet, the minimum height required to guarantee full range for the Hammer bombs. On the display, the launch signal flips to green. This was the instant that made every risk worthwhile. One by one, the MiGs unleash their payloads. 4 AASM Hammer bombs drop from the wings in quick succession. Their folding wings extended, micro thrusters fired, and each weapon fixed itself onto its preset trajectory. But the real destructive power comes from the smart SJU-64 fuse, which calculates exactly how each explosion will unfold. The first bomb is programmed for delayed penetration, smashing through the upper levels of the main structure before detonating deep inside the installation's command hub. The destruction is immediate. Server racks, antennas, and control consoles are reduced to debris in milliseconds. The second bomb is set for an airburst, exploding just a few meters above the vehicle yard. The outcome is devastating. Blazing fragments shoot out in all directions. Fireballs ignite, and a fuel tank erupts in a bright orange flare visible for kilometers. The third is designed for immediate impact. It crashes straight into the makeshift quarters of the Russian operators, which crumble under the sheer force of the explosion. The fourth and final bomb carries a short delay penetration, tearing through the logistics depot before detonating within. The result is a fierce blaze, engulfing spare parts, drones awaiting repair, and vital stockpiles. Imagery recorded by Ukrainian drones verifies the devastation. In mere seconds, the Russian base turns into an ocean of fire and rising columns of dark smoke. The command hub is left in shambles. Vehicles and antennas are obliterated, while the living quarters are turned into wreckage. With the objectives consumed by fire, a single task was left: escape. The MiG-29s plunged once more into low-level flight, hugging the ground and draining the last drops of fuel. One of them fought to stay airborne, its tail torn apart by fragments, and its hydraulic system severely damaged. Despite this, both jets pushed forward, slicing through enemy skies until they at last made it back into the safety of Ukrainian territory. The mission was nearly an unthinkable challenge. 2 Soviet-era fighters, enhanced with Western upgrades, had broken through one of the most heavily fortified air defense networks in existence. They dodged missiles from the Tor and Buk systems, outflanked a more advanced Su-30 interceptor, and, defying every expectation, leveled a command center that had long endangered the lives of thousands of civilians. And this was only one of the operations reshaping the battlefield. If you want to witness another strike that shifted the momentum, watch now. Ukraine has just hit a Russian weapons depot in an attack that changes the entire situation. Thank you for watching.